Rumble, X, YouTube, and Facebook. Wherever you are joining us, we are so happy to have you with us. And today it's our absolute pleasure to have Louisiana's Commissioner of Insurance, Tim Temple, with us. We'll be getting a full readout from him on how this session landed for insurance reform and whether we can expect and when we can expect to see rates going down. Before we get into that, let me read the scripture of the day. Excuse me. It is 2 Timothy chapter 1, verses 6 through 9. And the imprisoned Apostle Paul was writing to encourage his protege Timothy with these words. He says, I'm writing to encourage you to fan into flame and rekindle the fire of the spiritual gift God imparted to you when I laid my hands upon you. For God will never give you the spirit of fear, but the Holy Spirit who gives you mighty power, love, and self-control. So never be ashamed of the testimony of our Lord, nor be embarrassed over my imprisonment, but overcome every evil by the revelation of the power of God. And, spirits of intimidation and fear are just as real and active today as they were when Paul and Timothy were establishing the early church. They come against us to get us into shame, to get us into ineffectiveness, and to silence our voices. But our Lord, who raised himself from the dead and overcame every power of sin and darkness, raised us back to life with him, and all of our enemies are already defeated. Be encouraged. Isn't that encouraging? Our enemies are already defeated. They were defeated by the power of the cross and the resurrection of Jesus. So whom or what shall we fear? Our job now is to be bold, to speak the truth, and to live in love. We operate with different rules than the spirit of darkness. They come to intimidate. We come with hospitality. They come with fear. We come with love. They come to silence, and we come to be a voice for the voiceless. So don't forget who you are and the price Jesus paid to set you free. Psalms 115:16 reminds us of our roles. The heavens belong to our God. They are his alone. But he has given us the earth and put us in charge. So let's live in a way that brings freedom to others and honors our Lord.
Every day we have to do it. And, speaking of the voiceless, Danielle, there's a lot of people in Louisiana right now who feel that their voice really hasn't been heard. And having Commissioner Tim Temple on the show today, this is someone who I believe has heard the voice of the people and has done everything within his power and continues to do everything within his power to give our citizens relief on these catastrophic insurance rates in Louisiana. And I know is just a fighter all the way across the board, and someone who has a positive attitude everywhere he goes, despite the challenges that he faces. Commissioner Temple, for the third or so time, welcome to the State of Freedom, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Danielle and Chris. And look, I know that we didn't plan that, but that reading, Timothy. I mean, it's speaking directly to me, to my head and to my heart, because a lot of the things that we're trying to accomplish in our state, it is taking, you need that boldness, you need truth to truly show, what's broken in our state, but you also need to go with, with love and some humility too, as we try and take care of those that truly need, taken care of, and as we deal with this insurance crisis. And, the perfect reading there. Thank you.
You're welcome. And it's so funny. Every morning when we have a show, I sit down with the Lord and I say, all right, what scripture do you want me to bring? I don't come with an agenda. And that's where he sent me this morning. And it wasn't until after he finished talking to me about it that I was like, oh, Timothy, we're having Timothy on the show. This is going to be interesting.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah,
we're there for a reason. Commissioner Temple, there was a bill that Danielle and I talked about multiple times throughout the session, a bill that we strongly opposed, and one that you strongly opposed, and for legitimate reasons. It was HB 148 by Jeff Wiley. And as you know, the bill has now been signed by the governor. And to put it very simply, it confers plenary authority on the commissioner of insurance to reject insurance rates, reduce insurance rates, basically do whatever he wants to do without any mandatory application of market principles or actuarial principles by which he has to make these determinations. Our view is that it's just an unconscionable investment of power and authority in the insurance commissioner with little or no accountability. And there's not always going to be a Tim Temple as the commissioner of insurance. And that's the big hesitation that we had. And here's my question about the bill. With how are insurance companies responding to this legislation now that it's been signed by the governor?
Yeah, Chris, I appreciate you bringing that bill up. I certainly want to talk about it. It's bad. I can't put it any more simply than that. This was a very bad bill. I've already had conversations with two very large carriers in our state that are deeply concerned with how this is going to be applied. And I've got more conversations coming up with other insurance companies that want to talk about this because it does introduce a subjectivity to doing business in the state of Louisiana. And I think that it's one thing, whether it's your business, an insurance business, a gas station, a grocer, an energy company, everybody wants predictability and stability in what the rules are that they're going to be held accountable to and what the laws are that they're going to be held accountable to. And this was simply a bad bill. It was a very political bill. It introduced the notion that the reason rates are high in Louisiana today is because the commissioner doesn't have the authority to hold down excessive rates. And that is further from the truth. I mean, as commissioner under the prior law, I have denied excessive rates over 20 times. And so I have the ability, I have the authority, and I've exercised it. This has introduced a subjectivity that just, I can now wave a magic wand and lower rates. And I think that's my fear, is that people are going to believe that. And that's not how this business works. That's not how any business works. And so, Chris, Danielle, I've had conversations. I'm trying to assure the insurance industry, the marketplace, that I am going to continue to operate in a very predictable and, stable regulatory environment. And I am. I'm encouraging companies to come to Louisiana despite this bad bill. We have passed some good legislation. I want them to know that I'm going to act honorably. I'm not going to introduce political whim in rate setting or anything else. I mean, it sounds good to a consumer that, oh, here's someone with some, unlimited authority to lower rates, but that's not how this works. Louisiana is now more liberal in insurance regulatory environment than California. And California was by far the most liberal. And so, I'm going to continue to work with insurance companies to help bring them here, while at the same time protecting consumers' interest and making sure that holding insurance companies accountable, making sure that they pay claims when they're fair, making sure that they're paying just amounts, and as quickly and timely as possible. So it's introduced a lot of confusion in the marketplace where we didn't need it.
Yeah.
So Tim, is this a fair characterization of the bill? You said that you had the authority before to adjust rates when necessary, to reject increases by insurance companies. So if you had the authority before, what was the purpose of this law? Was this simply to make the insurance commissioner completely untethered to having to justify what he does? Because I notice in the bill there is no requirement that he adhere to well-established actuarial principles in the decision that he makes. It's purely optional.
It's may,
it says,
not
it,
shall.
It says that he may, which by inference means that he can basically do whatever he wants for whatever reason he wants to do it, without any justification at all. Is that a fair characterization of this law?
It is, and that is, Chris, exactly what insurance companies have an issue with. I mean, they don't know how they're going to be held, to what standards they're going to be held accountable to. I can certainly sit down and have a conversation with them and assure them, but I could change my mind tomorrow now, right?
Right.
There's nothing that's going to hold me to that. The next commissioner of insurance, whomever he or she may be, may run for purely political reasons. Look, I think this introduces, again, so much confusion in the marketplace. And Chris, to answer the question, look, I can only go by the words of the person that was behind this legislation that said that we need to pass this bill and we can blame him, blame me.
And that leads me to this follow-up. Is it your position that that's exactly what the purpose of the bill was? Because it's been our position all along that many of these insurance bills, many of the bills that were in Governor Landry's insurance package are going to do little or nothing to reduce insurance rates in Louisiana. And perhaps he knows that already, and that he is sort of peremptorily positioning you to take the blame for his anticipated failures. And I don't believe it's too strong to say that. And it sounds to me like maybe you're suggesting that also.
I certainly wouldn't argue against what you've just said, Chris. But look, and I think it's one thing. Look, I came in this office not to be political, but to bring my experience, background, my knowledge to try and shape Louisiana into a more competitive marketplace. Because I know that the commissioner cannot just come in and tell insurance companies that they have to lower rates because they're too high. It doesn't work like that. And, so I'm not political. I'm more of a policy. I've never considered myself a policy wonk, but I do understand the complexities of insurance. And so my intent from day one is to try and come in, help the consumers, help my fellow citizens understand the nature of insurance. And it's simply, it's dollar in, dollar out. You may have heard me say that before. And premiums are based on losses, past losses and projected losses. And so what we're trying to do through legislation is to reduce the number of frivolous claims, and also go after fraudulent claims, so that we as Louisiana ratepayers, buyers of insurance, aren't paying for frivolous and fraudulent claims in our state. And Louisiana has a problem. I'll say it again. Louisiana has a problem with frivolous and fraudulent claims in our state. And I'm not going to go into how we got there, because the past is the past. But as of today, looking forward, that's my mission, is to try and change the laws so that we don't encourage, promote, and protect fraudulent and frivolous claims in the state of Louisiana. Because you and I, one, we don't deserve to pay those types of claims. And two, we cannot afford to pay those types of claims.
Have you, on the topic of changing the laws, have you talked to any legislators who have committed to carrying a bill that would amend HB 148 and say that you must use actuarial data to drive your decision making in a future session, maybe I guess 26, if nothing else presents before then?
Yeah, Danielle, I have not had that direct conversations, but I think that there will be plenty or ample number of legislators that would be willing to tackle that. Now, look, we've also seen that there were a number of legislators that were punished, directly and solely because of their opposition to 148, as far as their voting record. And like I said, I haven't had direct conversations with people yet. I certainly will. But right now, I'm trying to, again, to mitigate that as best I can with direct conversations with insurance companies, with markets, speaking, every chance I get to get in front of, the industry, to let them know that they can count on me to hold them to be fair, and holding them accountable. And that's the thing. They still will be held accountable. But again, it's introduced a sticking point in our marketplace that we did not have to have. And again, going back to why, I do think it was purely political, blaming, pointing a finger, because changes do take time. And Chris and Danielle, this, your consumers, your listeners, your viewers know this. It does take time, but we are on the right path. And on the homeowners, I've said it on your program before. I've said it every time I get on the radio or TV programs. We are seeing positive changes in the property marketplace. Insurance companies are taking rate decreases. In part, reinsurance costs have come down, certainly, and that is a portion of it, but also in addition to the legislation that was passed last year. So people are seeing the benefit of that. I think we can expect the same on the auto market, but it takes time. These aren't going to change. And as a politician, politicians, it's interesting how a lot of everything is through a lens of timing. If we do this now versus then, and yes, you can pass legislation and people want to see the results immediately, but that's not how this business works, much less most businesses.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
appreciate you wanting to do the right thing, and I appreciate those legislators who stood up and did the right thing. And I
34,
hope,
As
Danielle,
do I.
34 of them. And Gabe Ferment, in particular, gave a very, very strong statement on the House floor in opposition to this bill. And there were 30 plus other Republicans on the House floor and a number of Republicans on the Senate floor, fewer, but a number who were also equally concerned about this legislation. And so, one of the things we do both on our State of Freedom podcast, Tim, and with LeCAG, my advocacy organization, we're going to make sure, and we already have begun to make sure that that constituents know how these Republicans voted on this bill, because it was, agree with you 100% that in a constitutional republic, where you have a House of Representatives and a Senate that is supermajority Republican, when they run on free market principles and principles of constitutional conservatism, and then vote and support for a bill that vests this kind of unchecked authority in one member of the executive branch, is absolutely antithetical to what we believe as free market conservatives. And I know it's antithetical to what you believe. And that's why the bill is so horrendous, and why it's so important that people know how these folks voted.
yeah. And I also want to add, sorry, Tim, just that those legislators, this is a tough political environment. Louisiana has a very tough political environment right now. And I hope that them getting slapped down just emboldens them. So if you're listening, be emboldened. Just take the hits as they come, man, because they're going to keep coming. The governor is just going to keep hitting you if you keep standing up for your people, but stand up for what's right. Sorry, Tim, over to you.
No. You're right, Danielle. And look, they and Chris, you said, Chairman, and he spoke from the well with passion, because he also understands this business and this industry, and he's actually doesn't work for the industry. He's an independent adjuster. So his job is to get you, the claimant, compensated quickly and accurately. And so he actually works for the consumer when you think about it. He understood it, very well, and his speech was spot on. But you're right, Danielle. Louisiana is tough in politics, but you know what? It doesn't have to be.
Right.
That's a choice. To be vindictive and to punish people, because of a vote. I've heard people say, well, that's just how it, that's just the way it works. It doesn't have to work that way.
It does not have to work that
No.
way.
You don't have to work. You're choosing to work against people, not with people.
Yeah. Well, and a house divided against itself cannot stand. We know that. So
Yeah.
I pray,
But look,
I pray for a
despite that,
turnaround.
we did pass some really good legislation, and if we can, I'd like to talk a little bit about some of that.
Yeah.
Representative Emily Chenevert passed a really what I think became a very substantial bill with modified comparative fault. 34 other states already operate under this premise. And in its simplest form, it's if you were more than 51% at causing an auto accident or an accident, then you can't sue the other party. I mean, it's not only is it common sense, it's ownership, being responsible for yourself. We encouraged and promote people to go and litigate when they were the cause of the accident, and it's just so common sense to me. That was a good bill.
Well, let me ask you this about that
Yes.
about that bill, Tim.
Yes.
What about if a party is 49% at fault in causing an accident? What is unfair about holding them 49% responsible?
Well, I mean, that's, I guess that, that's to be determined by the courts. But I mean, again, it's if you, just the basic premise. If you cause the accident, you don't recover. And the modified comparative fault, like I said, it works in 34 other states. I believe 17 of those states see some of the lowest premiums in the auto premiums in the country. Now, that I'm not saying that to suggest that that's the sole reason.
Right.
But I think it lends to that argument that states where the laws are set up where you're personally responsible for your actions, that's people that see the better competition there. I recently met with an underwriter, a Lloyd's underwriter. He made the comment. He said, in America, you don't have accidents anymore, do you? And you think about that, just the word accidents. Things don't happen accidentally, it seems like, in our country anymore. It's always somebody else's fault. And it really got me thinking about that. And so, and I'm doing more thinking about it. But, in other countries, you take responsibility for your actions. And then truly, when it is an accident, then there is legal recourse and there's things that you can do. But we've grown into, it seems like we've grown into a nation where everything that happens, anything bad that happens, is always somebody else's fault.
That's so true.
And we're owed something.
And we're always owed something because of this culture of victimhood that we exist in. There's no question. Something else popped into my head, Tim, a bill by Senator Alan Seabaugh that we strongly supported, and it was
SB 111.
SB 111, which we looked at very closely, in a bill which would have simply amended, codified, and clarified the bad faith law in Louisiana. And there were 3 or 4 specifically enumerated conditions in that bill in which an insurance company simply could not be held liable for bad faith, and pay all these monetary penalties for bad faith. If there's a legitimate dispute as to causation, legitimate dispute as to damages, whether or not the accident caused the damages, whether or not an insurance company has had enough time to fully investigate a claim. We read this bill and said, this is just very, very fair. It seems fair, it seems balanced, and it seems that it will give an insurance company a little bit better position rather than being ambushed by all these bad faith claims. And after saying that he would sign any insurance reform bill that comes to his desk, the House, the Senate took him at his word. They passed the legislation, gets to his desk, and he vetoes it. And what are your thoughts on the bill, and what are your thoughts on the veto?
Yeah, look, the bill was, like you said, to simply clarify it. The current law allows plaintiffs to assert bad faith when it lowers the bar to what is considered bad faith. It creates what I would call, and look, I'm not an attorney, but it created a loophole, an opportunity for abuse of what's considered bad faith. And there are people whose business model is to use that loophole and exploit it. And insurance companies end up being the recipient of this, paying additional claims that they shouldn't. And as you and I and your viewers know, then when they pay more, then we pay more through additional premiums. And so it was, as you said, it was to clarify, not to eliminate bad faith. With regards to the veto message, I mean, the veto message was 3 pages long. That's a lot of explaining. And you're right. And we were told that, well, this was an anti-consumer bill, and that's why it was vetoed. And it wasn't a legal reform bill. It was a legal reform bill, a tort reform bill. It should have been signed. It simply, again, Chris, allowed insurance companies to operate, and this would have allowed them to operate in a state in a more, again, predictable and stable legal environment. And I say this a lot. I started saying this before I became commissioner of insurance. Insurance capital goes where it's welcomed and where it's protected. And when I say protected, I don't mean that it's not going to be exposed to risk. It's that when it is exposed to risk, it's going to be treated fairly. And in Louisiana, insurance companies were not treated fairly. Now, look, if you as a consumer have not been treated fairly, then you still have legal recourse. And I want to make sure that everybody understands that. We're not trying to protect insurance companies from paying claims. we're trying to protect insurance companies from paying frivolous claims. And that's what this bill would have done, was to help clarify that position. And the bill was vetoed. I certainly hope that Senator Seabaugh brings it again next year. I will certainly be supportive of it. I think you'll find other legislators that will be supportive of it. And again, today we're going to make sure that consumers are protected, but trying to do it the way that it currently done under law doesn't help the consumer at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But
You got
but
SB. You also have, Tim. Excuse me. You also have this SB 214, which Danielle and I talked about at length and strongly opposed throughout the session. And Senator Duplessis ultimately pulled it back, which sort of came out of nowhere, which would make the insurance commissioner an appointed position in the state of Louisiana. If that had gotten through and signed, coupled with House Bill 148, which was signed, you talk about unchecked power, unchecked authority from a governor. That would have been just extraordinary. But you opposed SB 214. What was the source and the purpose of that bill?
Well, look, that was, Senator Royce Duplessis. You'd have to ask him, what his intent there is. I think that the senator and I, we've disagreed a lot on Senate insurance, on how we bring premium relief to consumers. Look, Senator Royce, I understand that he represents his district, and in his district, some of his district is very negatively impacted by high premiums. We're all impacted, but he's got some folks that disproportionately, I guess I would say. You can't do it by mandating, premium reductions. And there's a lot of things that the legislation that he supports that mandates premium reductions. It doesn't work that way. And I think that the fact that maybe, I opposed him on a lot of that stuff, he decided to bring a bill that I think is a personal attack. I mean, you can say it's not, and say it's not political, but Louisiana is, I will say this, Louisiana is different from most states in the fact that we are one of 12 that has an elected commissioner of insurance. I frankly believe that that's where Louisiana has it right, and the majority of the states have it wrong. I'm a big believer in elected representation. That's democracy. Whenever you if you take this position away as elected and give it to the governor to appoint, you're taking power directly from the people. As of today, I am directly responsible and answerable to each and every citizen of the state of Louisiana. Once this position becomes appointed, if it were to become appointed, then that person becomes, answerable to one person, the governor, or whatever person would appoint. And so I disagree with it, not because I'm sitting in this seat, but my core belief is that I think Louisiana has this right. And I can tell you, I sit on I'm a member of the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. And, the elected commissioners of insurance, I think, are much more responsive, much more in tune. And it's not to go against my fellow, commissioners that are appointed. But again, they are answerable to one person.
Yeah.
And that's not the best for this, for individuals.
It's not. In this past session, we talked a lot about the bills that seem to be trying to endow the governor with even more power and take more and more representation away from the people. And it's a trend we noticed. It's a concerning trend because, as we all know, this governor, not this governor, but every governor of the state of Louisiana has a tremendous and already undue amount of power versus the legislature. So it's something we're watching very closely, and it baffles the mind that we would want to continue to operate in that way. And I don't think the people of the state appreciate it.
Well, and look, and I can tell you, look, I came from the outside, from the business world, the non-political, into a very regulated office structure, right? You've got civil service, and you can't just do something because you want to do it. There's processes you have to go through, and I can certainly see if you're trying to lead the state and you want to promote economic, recovery and those types of things, that I can make an argument in my mind how having more consolidated power makes that job easier to do, but that I don't think that that's not what our country was founded on. It's not what Louisiana was founded on. And while it may not be the easiest when you have to go through a process, that's still the best. It's protecting
Yeah.
the citizens. And
Absolutely.
you know,
Absolutely.
and I would love to just be able to do anything I wanted anytime I wanted, but I don't think that would be in the best interest of the consumers and the citizens.
Yeah.
And certainly the business would not want to operate in that environment where,
Yeah.
that's just, it wouldn't work well.
Yeah. We already saw since session ended, Senator Valerie Hodges was on the show on Thursday and brought to our attention that one insurance company has left the state recently. Is that in any way connected to the legislation that was passed this past session, or something else?
Well, look, I'm aware, there is an insurance company that recently announced that they were not going to write any new personal umbrella policies.
Okay.
That was something that the information that they showed, it was Louisiana was, I want to say the loss ratio they had on personal umbrella policies was high three figures, like 400%, 500% loss
Jeez.
ratio. So for every dollar they wrote, they were losing $4 or $5. I think they didn't say this directly, but I inferred from the conversation that the passage of this bill helped accelerate their decision making on that. I am fearful that I know for certain, like I said, that insurance companies are looking internally at the capacity if they're going to continue to do business in Louisiana, and if so, how much money are they willing to risk doing business in the state of Louisiana? And I'm having those conversations, trying to, again, assure them that as long as I'm commissioner, they're going to be treated fairly, as long as they're treating, my fellow, citizens fairly on their claims. But, again, it just introduces that subjectivity right there. I mean, when you have rules and regulations to follow, that's what you do. When you remove that,
Tim, does this bill allow insurance companies to retroactively adjust rates, retroactively order insurance companies to refund premiums?
It has the ability for the commissioner of insurance to make the determination that a company made excessive profits in prior years and order them to refund excessive profits. Again, that's a interpretation. I think if a commissioner were to try and utilize that authority, that would most likely be challenged in court, is what I would anticipate. Or that company could simply just say, you know what, if that's how you're going to treat us, then we're not going to do business there. I hear a lot of talk about excessive profits, and I want anyone that thinks that insurance companies are making excessive profits, please come schedule a meeting with me, and we will sit down and we can show what excessive is. Certainly excessive losses in the state of Louisiana. And look, I'm thankful that companies make money in other states, because quite frankly, that's how they're able to operate and continue to do business in the state of Louisiana. I'm thankful that they make money in the stock market, because that's how they're able to pay claims in our state. If they were just writing an underwriting with no investment income at all, we wouldn't be able to afford to live here.
That's pretty damning.
Because of insurance. I mean, it's already unaffordable, but it would be extremely unaffordable compared to today. So we've got to have some conversations, some honest, open, transparent conversations about companies making money. Look, we have Louisiana pension funds that are invested in the stock market. We have Louisiana pension funds that are invested in insurance companies. They're making money. We want them to make money. I want the stock market to make a lot of money, because that shows our country's economy is doing well. So to try and punish companies because they make wise investments, again, I mean, you want me to have all that authority and determine if you've made too much money or not? That's certainly not free market. It's not capitalism. And it's certainly not American.
Yeah. Chris, question for you. What's our recourse as citizens, right? I mean, the governor signed the bill. Can we do a petition? What would citizens rising up outside of the legislative session against this look like?
I believe that now that the bill has been signed and is effective, I believe it's effective. I believe that the only August 1st. Okay. I believe that the only recourse would be to repeal it.
We can't get a
Per-
petition. Can we can't do anything like that.
I don't think so. I think it would have to be through the legislative process. Now, I think a petition by thousands and thousands of Louisiana citizens expressing their feelings on it could certainly help facilitate that process. But I believe that it would have to be, I may be wrong about it, but I believe that this would have to be repealed legislatively. Is that your understanding, Tim?
That's mine, and Chris, I would look to you to be the expert on that. But look, and Danielle, I think the process would have been obviously if the legislature decided to override.
Right.
Well, no, it became law. They can't if it was vetoed, so disregard that. That would be the process. The legislature would have to come in, introduce a bill next year to repeal that law or modify it.
Yeah.
And look, and I said this too. I mean, I've never maintained the position that Louisiana's rate regulatory law is the best in the country, but it does work. If we want to modify it, change it, I am happy to and I think it'd probably be a good exercise to sit down and look and see where we could improve our rate regulatory language. If there are things from other states that we could adopt and look and truly see if we do this, what is the intended and also the unintended consequences of changing some of these things. But go through it through a very transparent, calculated process and change it and improve it so that, I mean, I'd like Louisiana to have the best regulatory rules in the country, but just to pick a couple of states because saw something on the internet and say that's what we need to do is not, it's not good policy. It's not good lawmaking. It's sloppy.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to deal, and I am, and quite frankly, the citizens of Louisiana, we're going to have to deal with the outcome of, with the results of this.
Yeah. Well,
one of the things, excuse me, Danielle, but one of the things that I think has demoralized Louisiana citizens and caused them a lot of concern, and I've done some research on this, and I've kind of looked at how other states, how the governor interacts with the commissioner of insurance, and they seem to generally have a reasonably good working relationship in those states, and it appears as though there is not that type of rapport between you and Governor Landry, and it seems that it's difficult to get good things done when there's not an open line of communication between the commissioner of insurance and the governor. What do you think accounts for that, Commissioner Temple, and what can be done to improve that relationship?
Yeah, I'll tell you, and I've had some thoughts on this, and one of the things that I can tell you that I did not take into account in becoming a statewide elected official is interaction with other statewide elected officials. And I've got a good rapport, I think, with my fellow statewide elected officials. But I think that with the governor, we should be working hand in hand. I should be working with him to advance his agenda, which is to grow the state's economy, and I'm supportive of his efforts to do that. I would think that he would want to be supportive of my efforts to improve the insurance field where that hampers economic growth and development. And when companies come to Louisiana and they have to pay twice the property rates or twice the auto rates just to do business in our state, that puts a damper on economic development. So I am supportive of the governor's efforts to grow our state economy and the things that he's doing with tax reform and some other areas like that, education reform, LED. I would, and I look to him to be the leader on that. I was elected to address and to regulate the insurance industry and to address the insurance crisis in our state. And that means working through the legislature to change the regulations and the laws. And it's not the relationship that I want to have. I hope to improve it. I would like to be able to work with the governor to be effective in my job. And if I'm effective in my job, then that helps everybody in the state of Louisiana, whether you're an individual or a business. Perhaps there's a perceived threat there. and there shouldn't be. I'm an insurance guy. That's what I know. That's what I want to do. That's my focus in life, is to try and help make the insurance industry work in the state, because when it works and it's competitive, you and I and all of your viewers benefit from that. They benefit from competition. They benefit not only pricing competition, but one thing that people, I think, that's not talked about, or maybe it's overlooked, is that yes, we want lower premiums, but we also want a good claims process too, a good claims experience. And when you have companies coming in and competing, they're not just competing for your premium dollars, they're competing on their service level to you. And that's something that we really don't talk about. It's like, whether it's a gas station or a grocery store, we as people, consumers, have a lot of options in those areas. And the price of a gallon of milk might be the same in one grocery store versus the other. But if there's one that treats you a little better, maybe their store's brighter, their floors are cleaner, there's just other things, that service associated with it. If there's one that you feel better about going to because of the way you're treated, even if the price is the same, you're going to pick that other one. Yeah. And I think that's one thing that we don't really talk about. And maybe I'm saying here now, acknowledging I need to maybe talk more about that when I speak, when I'm out speaking publicly, about the service aspect of it too. We will get better service when we have more competition as well. Not just the premium benefit, but the service benefit.
Yeah. I agree with you. Let's talk about a bright spot. Yeah. Senate Bill 231, Senator Mike Reese brought a collateral source bill, and basically that means that juries get to know the true amount owed and the amount originally billed for medical costs, and then lets the juries make the decision. This is a bill that we supported this session. Chris really felt like this was one of the few reform bills that was going to make a big impact on the bottom line for premium holders. And maybe just to mention, at the beginning or before the beginning of session, Governor Landry suggested that he would sign a bill if it was a collateral source bill, if it was like the one in Texas. And last year, he vetoed a very similar bill to this. So we had some concerns that he would veto it again, because I don't believe it ended up like Texas, because as it turned out, when Chris looked into it, the Texas law was virtually identical to the law we already had, that shielded juries from knowing the full amount. And I think ultimately costing insurance companies tens of thousands of dollars per suit, and, above what they should. But the governor did sign the final bill. Do you think where it landed will bring meaningful change to auto insurance rates? Or are we being overly optimistic?
Well, look, I'm very appreciative of Senator Reese authoring this legislation and shepherding it through the process. But, Danielle, all of that, everything that you said, as far as what the bill does, relates to when healthcare insurance is utilized. And I think it's important to make that, to distinguish that it's when you're involved in an auto accident and you use your health care. So it has the and it will bring more transparency in that scenario. Where my fear is that, and we don't have we can't quantify this. We're trying to do this, but in a scenario where, Danielle, you may get in an auto accident and you use your health care, and let's say for whatever reason you litigate, then all that would be brought to bear, billed versus paid.
Yeah.
Chris may be involved in an auto accident. He hires an attorney, just like you did, but he didn't use his health care. The attorney said, you know what, let me fund that. Let me pay for that, and we will recover that through litigation. In the scenario where you're not using your health care, but you're using it's called private pay, then the judge and jury does not have access to that.
Wow.
And
unless there is an agreement between the attorney and the medical provider for a reduced amount. And in that situation, what happens? The attorney and the medical provider maybe have an oral agreement or an understanding, but nothing is committed to writing. And so the jury really has no evidence to look at in that situation.
That's my understanding as well, Chris. And The fear is that that number, that scenario is much larger than the scenario, Danielle, where you use your health care. And if
see.
that's the case, then it's not going to move the needle greatly. It does look. I don't want to take away from it. It is a good bill. It is it's more than a step. It's a pretty good leap forward considering where we were in the past. But my additional fear is that next session. I mean, I've already heard rumblings from the Capitol building. Is that, well, we've done enough. We need to pause and we need to let all this take effect and let's see what it does. We can't do that. I can tell you as an elected official, the citizens of Louisiana deserve that every time. I mean, look, they deserve for me to do my job all the time, constantly, just like the legislature. Whenever they go into session, we need to be bringing reform. We need to constantly strive to improve our state and the legal environment. And what I don't want to see happen is next year, legislators get, direction that, okay, we've done enough. Don't bring any more reform because, we need to wait and see. Look, the people of Louisiana can't wait and see. We need to constantly try and improve. And so, Chris, I think there is a gap on what this bill, it leaves a gap on what will be transparent. And we need to make sure that next year we bring legislation. And I'm probably going to pick up a lot of enemies just because I just said that. But we need to fix things that need to be fixed.
Yeah.
Fix
One
things that are
more
broken.
question. One more
Yes,
question on Reese's bill. In serious accident cases, and you may not know the stats on this, Commissioner Trimble, but in serious accident cases where an injured party has health insurance, wouldn't they be going through their own health insurance the vast majority of the time?
I don't have the stats. That certainly would make common sense, but there's businesses around that as well. So,
litigation funding companies and all that.
Third-party litigation funding companies. And look, there are times when I can see scenarios where maybe your healthcare provider is not going to authorize maybe the doctor that you want to see or the specialist that you think you need in a serious injury or something like that. I can make justification for times when you might need to go outside of your healthcare provider, your health insurance. But that's the reason we have health insurance is for accidents, for things like this. And so that needs to be primary and utilized. That should be the norm. And it seems like now this third-party medical or third-party litigation funding and all this other stuff, that has become the norm.
Are public hospitals covered under this as well, or how does that factor in?
That's a good question. I don't know if that would be considered private pay or not.
It might depend on whether you have Medicare, maybe.
Yeah, Danielle, that's a good question. I don't know that that's been contemplated, but it's one I'm going to ask.
Yeah,
we need to get to the bottom of that one.
Yeah,
absolutely. Let me ask you about another bill here that the governor made a lot of hay about. Essentially blaming Senator Seabaugh for the fact that it failed in committee, his lawyer advertising bill that was part of his insurance reform package. I looked at that bill pretty closely, Commissioner Temple. It's my own view that it really cuts around the edges and really doesn't do a whole lot to restrict lawyer advertising, but the bill failed anyway. What were your thoughts on that bill, and where did you come down on it? The one that would impose some nominal restrictions on lawyer advertising?
Well, look, I think, and if I remember correctly, that was more of a transparency bill where, if I remember correctly, Chris, and please correct me, that you had to, it would have required that you show if I got $100,000, then I truly, as a claimant, had to get that. Or if I only got 60,000 of that, and 20,000 went to medical and 20,000 went to attorneys. I think that's what that bill was going to do. I can see. Look, I'm supportive of transparency in that. I certainly think that people need to understand when it's advertised that when you're jumping up and down on TV that so and so got me $1 million. it normalizes that people think that that's what they're going to get in their pocket, when in truth, whether it's a settlement or a judgment, there is a distribution, from whatever that ultimate amount is. And so I was supportive of that. I don't think that doing that would disincentivize people from filing, litigation.
Right.
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 And I think that's, and as we've said on your program, and I've said many times before, and even the governor's acknowledged it, we have a litigation, problem in our state. We litigate more than twice the national average. And so I don't think it truly would have dissuaded people from filing lawsuits. It certainly needed to be done, because again, that would have been a step forward. And just like there was a bill that did pass, it was an advertising. It says that insurance companies cannot add into the premium rate advertising costs.
Right.
And look, there are only 2 states in America that do that, and it's Texas and California. And the numbers that I've seen, at best, it's a 0.2% or 0.2 or 0.4, 0.2 or 0.4% of your premium. So, does it sound good? Yes. And again, if they want to bring that, that's fine. But again, only 2 states now 3 with Louisiana, prohibit that. But the other thing too is we have to look at the legislation. I don't know that it inhibits or will dissuade companies from wanting to spend advertising dollars in our state. I mean, there's a couple of very large sporting events that take place in our state that are supported by, that's advertising for insurance companies, and have done it for many years. And those organizations have contributed millions of dollars to charities in our state, associated with those sporting events. And I know that those companies are taking a look at that now to figure out if that's something that's allowable, permissible, going forward. So that bill could have an unintended consequence.
Well, it failed.
No, the lawyer advertising bill
Oh,
failed.
yeah, the lawyer.
Yes, sir.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Right.
Yes, the lawyer advertising bill failed. The insurance advertising bill passed.
That passed.
So,
right. Yeah.
But no, again, and look, I think that was, again, probably politics at play. Alan Seabaugh not being on that committee, still, you would have had the votes if it had been pushed hard enough. You could have had the votes to get that bill passed.
I think so. Yeah, I think so too. But to blame it on Senator Seabaugh's absence exclusively, I think is unfair.
I would agree. That was unfair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tim, you mentioned, sorry, Chris, you mentioned home insurance reforms that were done last session. Was there anything meaningful passed this session?
Yes, we had a bill that, let's see, we have a transparency bill that now going forward, insurance companies will have to notify the Department of Insurance whenever they stop writing or pause writing in an area of the state. Currently, they don't have to notify the department. They will. So that gives us situational awareness. If an insurance company is starting to pull back in a certain area, that helps us understand how the market is doing. There was a transparency bill on premiums. You'll have to show your expiring premium and your new premium when you renew. Mm-hmm. So, a lot of times people, they may have known what it was a year ago, but it's not anywhere written down. And so it's going to require that. We had a bill that when you file a claim, you have to submit satisfactory proof of loss. So you have to show a document that says this is the loss I received, and it's good because it's twofold. It holds you as the consumer accountable. Again, saying that the claim that I'm filing, the damages that I'm saying truly occurred as a result of this loss. So it holds you accountable to make sure that you're honest on that point. It also holds the insurance companies accountable because now you have a document that once you have submitted that to the insurance company, it also gives you a piece of paper of when the clock starts ticking on towards that bad faith on, if they
Okay.
don't respond to your claim within a certain number of days or start to pay, it gives you a means to hold the insurance companies accountable as well. And so I think it was a good bill for both sides. And I know there was another bill I think we extended. Oh, notice of cancellation. Insurance companies now have to give you 60 days notice of cancellation if they're going to non-renew your policy versus the 30 days. So it gives you more time to know that might be happening, or know that is happening, and the ability to go out and start to look for other insurance. So that was a good consumer protection bill as well.
Great. Thank you.
Tim, 64 million.
And if I can,
Go
too,
ahead.
I'm sorry.
Sure.
And these were ones, and shame on me for forgetting this, because these were ones we pushed hard, was on the fortified roof program. And I think that, you're familiar with that. You can get a grant up to $10,000 to put a fortified roof on your home. We have created a permanent funding stream now so that the insurance companies, the fees that they pay to the Department of Insurance collects are now going, we increase them. So that money will go towards funding, creating a permanent funding stream for fortified, but also a portion of the taxes that you and I pay on our property insurance. A portion of that will now be dedicated to the fortified roof funding program. And so you will have, I won't have to go, or the Commissioner of Insurance doesn't have to go to the legislature every year asking for money from the general fund, state general fund, to put into the program. This will actually create a permanent funding stream. So that is a huge benefit.
That's
but they also increase the tax deduction that you could receive if you choose to put a fortified roof on yourself. So if you go out, and so Danielle, if you got a fortified roof through the grant program, you're going to get up to $10,000. So you can't claim a deduction.
Yep.
Chris, if you were to choose to put a fortified roof on yourself, you could go out and get up to a $10,000 tax deduction. And Chairman Kirk Talbot passed that legislation, and it went from $5,000 to $10,000. So the same amount, for both. So those were two good bills. I think we'll continue to promote fortified roofs, which I hear story after story after story of people getting substantial decreases on their homeowners insurance when they get that fortified roof on. The credits out there are real. They're substantial. They're not every company. I mean, every admitted company has a credit. Not all of them are the same. Each has their own underwriting standards, but the ones I hear out there are substantial. And I encourage everybody to, if you can afford it, put a fortified roof on. If you can't, go through the grant program, and as money becomes available and we do this drawing, hopefully you get one of those grants and get a fortified roof.
Yeah. Is the process of applying for that, Tim, is that manageable for people? Is it a good process, simplified, efficient process?
It is, and we've made it even better. It's very straightforward. You can go to the department's website and follow it tells you what the qualifications are. It has to be, your primary residence. You have to have your homeowners, your homestead exemption on that piece of property. It can't be a vacation property or a second or third home or something like that. But you can put a fortified roof on yourself on other properties that you own.
Yeah.
But it's
and
very
claim the
straightforward.
deduction and claim the deduction.
And claim the deduction on those
Yeah.
other ones. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's good.
So
Well,
but thank you for asking about that.
Yeah. The $64 million question here, Tim, after looking in retrospect, the good, the bad, and the ugly of the session, what got through, what didn't get through, what is the likelihood that Louisiana consumers and policyholders are going to see a measurable reduction in their auto insurance rates in the foreseeable future?
Well, look, I think that, like I've said, premiums follow losses. And the intent of the legislation that we've passed is to reduce the frivolous and the fraudulent claims that occur in our state on auto side. So when these laws start to take effect, I think the January 1st is when the modified comparative fault goes into play. When insurance companies can start to see those positive trends, then I think that's when you can anticipate premiums going down. There's a component of the premium that has to do with like physical damage. So as the cost, and right now, we were in a pretty strong inflationary period. So just, $1,000 repair was, $1,200 because of inflation. So that's moderated some. So there's a component of the auto premium that is starting to come down. But that liability is what really we're talking about. And I think when insurance companies can start to see that, or, like I said, I'm messaging that to insurance companies right now, and I'm telling them, Louisiana is paying attention. We understand what drives the losses in our state, so we're trying to address that. You'll probably get a company or two that want to bet on they want to hedge their bet a little bit and say, okay, these are good laws and we're going to come in. But I'll tell you, Chris, the biggest headwind I've got, though, was House Bill 148, Act 11.
Yeah.
It introduces just uncertainty where it didn't need to be. And so I'm managing that. I'm talking to the insurance companies. I'm assuring them or reassuring them as best I can that they will be treated fairly and held accountable. But it was unnecessary.
Yep.
So
and
we'll manage
as I
that.
said at the outset, Tim, your position is not a perpetually ordained position.
No,
You're not going to be there forever. Assuming you run for reelection and win, that term will end, and who knows, who comes after you. And that's the concern about the legislation. But before we let you go, I want to ask you a question. Can you give us a scenario in which this 148, this bill that was signed by the governor, could be used by an insurance commissioner for political reprisal, political retaliation, or for any other political reason?
Oh, look, I think that it's really, look, we used to have a rating commission. And I know that the governor's referenced it in the past, and, up until, I think it was 2007 or 2008, we had a rating commission, and it was, a bunch of appointed members that it was heavily political. There were insurance companies that came in and they would say, we need a 5% rate increase or a 10% rate increase, whatever it was. And the commission would say, no, but we'll negotiate. Or, you need to, it was political. Let's just say that. So I think that this makes it a one-man rating commission now.
Right, exactly.
This bill. And I again, we don't want to go to that. There were a lot, people can do their own research. I mean, there were a lot of bad things that happened with the rating commission, and we don't need to introduce that subjectivity. You could say, you didn't, you didn't contribute to my campaign, or or whatever, or you contribute to somebody else's campaign. Or, I mean, again, we don't even, I hesitate saying that because I don't even want to say that, because that's what this has the ability to do. Or, quite frankly, even it introduces the thought that, okay, the reason you did something for one company versus another is because they did contribute or they didn't, whether or not that thought process ever even took place.
It still creates, in other words, Tim, you could be doing something for very legitimate reasons, and you have all the fiscal data that you need, and yet still be suspected of doing it for political reasons.
And I'm going to go ahead and say that will be used.
Yeah.
That argument will be asserted, whether it's myself or somebody else in the future. I mean, that's the thing. It introduces that, and it didn't need to happen. Yeah. It shouldn't have happened. And but look, we're going to deal with it. We're going to work through it. We're going to continue to work to bring companies to Louisiana so that consumers benefit from that, despite look, there's always some bad, ugly legislation out there, but we're going to put that to the side and keep moving forward, because again, Chris and Danielle, there is no reason other than losses that we pay the premiums that we're paying. That it's not because insurance companies are making more money in the state of Louisiana than somewhere else. It's not because they're denying claims. It's because they're paying out claims, and the loss data supports that. In our state, they pay more than they should compared to other states, compared to the number of accidents that happen, compared to the bodily injury claims and the litigation. insurance companies pay out more money in this state than they do others. And as a result of that, our premiums are higher. If we get that under control, and that's what I'm focused on, we get that under
Yeah.
control, then you and I and everybody watching this and everybody that lives in our state could expect to have lower premiums when we get that under control. But if we don't, if we're happy with the current environment, if we like the way that it works and we like the ability to go file a claim just because or litigate just because, and I say just because, something has to be substantiated from that, but the threshold is very low. If we're happy with that ability, well, then we're just going to have to expect to continue to pay some of the highest premiums in the country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's only so much that you can do, and as we've talked about before, Tim and Danielle and I have certainly discussed, a lot of this at bottom is a cultural issue. It's a cultural issue. It's an issue of integrity, and an issue of honesty. And there's only so much the law can do to regulate or curtail that. And that's just the way it is. Our Constitution, as our founding fathers said, we're meant to serve a moral and an honest people, and you can't legislate good behavior. You can't legislate morality, so you're not God over here in the Commissioner of Insurance office. You can do everything that you can do and are doing, but you can't do it all. Before we let you go, Commissioner Temple, I just want to let our listeners know that Serge Brown will be coming on this Thursday. He's the founder of the Clear Skies movement. And we will be talking with him about the extent to which this geoengineering in our skies is causing problems, let's just say, with our weather and the sinister forces behind some of this geoengineering. He's very knowledgeable in the issue, and you don't want to miss it, particularly in light of some of the legislation that was passed this past session on geoengineering. But Commissioner Temple, God bless you, sir. And thank you for joining us and always taking the time and for being so gracious with us.
Look, thank you both for your time today and being on the program, and I look forward to doing it again. As I always say, if it's relevant to you for me to come back on, I'm happy and look forward to doing so.
God bless
Thank
you, sir.
We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. All right, God bless.
God bless.